Hi, this is Suhailah, and this is Grow With Me by Suhailah, the podcast, and this is episode 8. Episode 8 represents part 2 in a 4-part series that began a week ago with part 1. The series name is Wade in the Water, Roadmap to Healing with my energy healer, Kim. Part 1 was called Into the Depths, and you might want to go back and listen to that one. It was released a week ago, so it should be here in this channel wherever you're listening to this. And you might want to also, even if you don't listen to that whole episode, which was a little over a half hour, you might want to just listen to the intro, because the intro itself talks about exactly what this series is about and how it began. But for now, part 2, here we are. It's called Clearing the Debris. And in this episode, we go a little bit into the relationship, deeper into the relationship between trauma and healing in the nervous system. We explore how trauma lives in the body and how healing begins with regulating the nervous system. Trauma isn't something that just happens in the mind. You don't think, oh, something happens to me and I'm traumatized. It's something that's actually stored in the body. It's a full body experience. So science is telling us now that it's stored in the body, and the body sends more signals to the brain than the brain does to the body. So we got into that a little bit last week in the first episode, but we get into this further in this one. We also talk about how the role of spirituality and healing and just daily practices, whatever that might look like for you, and tools, which is the whole point of this podcast and everything I do with my newsletter and all the work that I do. Is always to offer people tools. That's my bottom line, to give people hope, to give people tools, to give people a way to save themselves, right? And a way to help themselves. And it's funny because I said that accidentally just now, naturally, but that is what we got into. Kim actually started to unpack how it is our job to create safety for ourselves and why creating safety from within is key. We also talk about belief, spirituality, and why healing is never one size fits all. It's never, ever, ever, ever one size fits all. So my role and my job and what I feel like my mission here is, and you might want to go back and listen to episode 1 in general, but the intro itself is 6 minutes, a little over 6 minutes. But in there, Kim and I both talk about what we feel our purpose is, which is to help alleviate suffering in this world through the work we do, whether we're talking to one person at a time, hundreds of people at a time, 10 people at a time, or just the entire world. That is our mission in big and small ways. So you might want to go back and listen to that, but that is the point of this. The point of all the work that I do is to provide tools, provide people with hope. Hope, I think is so important, especially if you feel like you're suffering in any kind of way, or if you can't navigate your life or navigate yourself and you're in a state of confusion. To me, starting with ourselves is the answer in changing the world. I will always stand 10 toes down on that. We point outside, we say, I don't like this world, and I don't like the world I live in. I don't like what I'm seeing. And we cannot even sit with ourselves to change our smallest habits that we do not like in ourselves. I will stand forever in the belief that change starts with the individual. Everything I do is about that. I embody that. The way I live my life is about that. And this is why I show up for this podcast, my newsletter, and everything else I do. Because I'm still on this journey, and this is why I'm also able to share tools with you, because I've experienced it and I'm like, oh, this might work for someone else. Let me share, right? So that is the point of this. I hope you get that. I hope you enjoy it. So let's get into the episode. I'll stop here. I'll just say 2 things that I also mentioned last week, which is, I know we had a little bit of sound issue. Kim was my first guest, and this was one session. Kim and I sat down for over 2 hours, and then I broke it up into 4 episodes. So the sound sort of goes up and down. Bear with me, bear with us. I know there's an issue. It was my first time using the app. If you notice it, forgive me. I don't think it gets in the way of the message. You can still hear it loud and clear, but I just want to make you aware of that. I'll do better next time. Number 2, I just want to read a quick disclaimer. The content of this podcast is for informational and inspirational purposes only. It is not intended to diagnose, treat, or replace professional, medical, or psychological or therapeutic advice. Always seek support from a qualified professional for any mental health or medical concerns. The views shared here are personal and do not represent any official or clinical guidance. Thank you so much. Let's get into it. I want people to really understand that energy is a real thing. It's a real thing, just how electricity is a real thing. Like, we may not be able to see it. It's life force. It's not woo-woo, because I think your point about the how is a little bit of a problem these days, because it's almost like everything is being packaged, like, here, do this thing. This is the way. This is the how. It doesn't matter what you call it.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to know when you're healed and what you're not. You could do all of these courses. You could take all of these. So many people are offering so many things. I'm not saying they're legit or not legit, but I think the path to healing is so different for everyone that I always have a problem when people are like, try these 3 things and you're going to be healed and awakening.
I'm the first one to tell people when they're coming to me, like, we're going to do a specific thing. We're going to do so much, right? But there's other things you're going to need to do.
Yeah.
Right? We need a full tool bag.
Yeah.
Especially in people who are carrying a lot of or have experienced a lot of trauma and have PTSD or complex PTSD, right? And there's no one way to it's not a great metaphor, but there's no one way to skin a cat, right? There's 1,000 ways to skin a cat. And by the way, like, all these different modalities or all these different tools are what might not work today may work after you do the work that's present for right now.
Yeah.
Right? It might just be further down the path, or what's really working for you right now and causing all this amazing change and has really, like, you feel so much better and you healed and you lost all this weight and you did whatever it is. And then all of a sudden it doesn't work anymore. It's not that it doesn't work anymore. It's that you've grown out of it and now you need something else.
Exactly. And I think the how is a lot of people these days. I mean, I'm glad that a lot of people are coming into spiritual awareness and self-awareness, even if the spiritual part is not there, whether it's whatever the gateway drug is or whatever the thing was that led you there, you know, whether it was, to me, I'm happy that there's so much talk about it. But I do feel like a lot of people just think if I do A, B, or C, I'm going to be healed. And the proof is in the pudding. Even if you don't have a word for it, you'll know by how you feel, and you'll know by your life experience and the quality of your life. You know,
and that's what I always say. I'm like, it doesn't, because I oddly get a lot of atheists, and then they'll say, I don't think this is going to work for me because I don't believe in it. And I'm like, okay, well, why don't we do a session? And if you feel better, then do another session. If you don't, then it does, no harm, no foul. Yeah. But then they're like, well, if I don't believe it, how does it work? It doesn't matter. Listen, I'm the first one. I'm at the age. I am not interested in being right over being happy.
Yeah. So
as long as it works, I'm good to go. but I'm not saying there's no discernment in my decisions. Don't get me wrong. But, to go back to the point of the how, I think it's also really interesting too. There's a lot of, what do I want to say about this? It just made me think of medicine. There's a lot of medicine that doctors actively prescribe that work for certain things, and they have no idea. They'll say, we have no idea how or why this works. We have no idea how or why this. Some SRIs are like that. They actually don't know why it works. But we take it anyways, even though we don't have a how or a why, because, the science community gives it to us. But we do have faith in that. It's still blind faith. We don't understand how it works. You understand what I'm saying? So it's interesting that when we apply it to something spiritual or energetic, then suddenly, like, oh, if you can't explain how, then it's not real.
Yeah. And I always say, like, even if you don't understand, energy is real. So let's just stop there. That's a hard stop. Energy is real.
And science is backing it.
Yeah. And spirituality has always led. First of all, I think science and spirituality used to be one. They should have never been separated.
Yes.
Spirituality.
I agree.
That's first. And then second of all, I feel like spirituality always leads the way. It may be 100 years, like just how people didn't used to believe meditation works. Now everyone, my MD will tell me to meditate. They know that this is measurable, the results of this with stress and other things. And it's like the difference between medicine and poison is the dosage, right? Right. Yes. So anything, one way or another. So I just want people to understand that energy is real. It's life force energy. It's vital life force energy. People call it different things, prana and chi, I think is one. So people can research that on their own if they're listening to, but it is real. And I think that we pick and choose when we want to use it. We can all acknowledge someone has bad vibes, right? Almost everyone can say that. I didn't like their energy. I didn't like their vibes. I've heard people, the most corporate, buttoned up people say that.
Yeah.
When someone walks in a room. So we understand it to some extent, but we're not willing to go all the way there, right? And then even in modern times, I'll be sitting in a meeting. Oh, it's Mercury retrograde. That must be why I didn't get that email. People literally use this as real reasons. So this is all energy stuff we're talking about as well. So I do believe, Kim, something sounds echoey. Hold on. Echoey.
Yeah, it's light.
Okay,
it's gone on my end now.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
To your point, though, I want to go back because I think it's really important what you're saying about spirituality. I just heard, actually, on the Mel Robbins podcast, she had somebody on in the last couple of months, and I wish I could remember her name. But she is a neuroscientist, and she was talking about that they know that 83% of people with a spiritual practice, like basically you're 83% less likely to suffer from depression if you have any spiritual practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they also scan people's brains. And anybody with a spiritual practice, there is an area of the brain that was far more developed than people without.
Yeah.
So there is a physical impact to a spiritual practice as well.
Yeah.
So it is real. And by spiritual, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be, it can be religious. It can be religious, but it also can be connecting to nature. It can be meditation. They're vitally important for humans and their well-being, the spiritual practice and connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, to me, I always just describe spirituality is something beyond your five senses. I mean, sometimes include your five senses.
Yeah.
But it's just believing whatever it is that floats your boat. But I think we have to reach beyond just this physical body and these things that we have been told about what we're capable of, where things come from, how we're built, why things are going wrong. They're not really wrong. And that's why I never even so I never heard stuff like trauma. This is new language for me, even the past few years. Like, I was on this journey. I didn't know that that's what I was doing, but I knew I was just trying to get to the bottom of myself, my own pain, my own discomfort, my own patterns, the repeating cycles that I was sick of myself, so that's why I don't even like to sometimes say I was on a healing journey. I now can look back and say it's been a healing journey.
Right.
I didn't set out with a backpack like, oh, let me go on this journey. I would have done it.
You didn't have a map with a location per se.
I wouldn't have done it had I known what it was really going to take. Because sometimes it can take you to the depths. And And but so that's why I just like to it's breathing. It's just part of our lives. It's just that these parts, I don't know, they've been wiped and stripped from us as if there's something extra. To me, they are not something extra. They are necessary.
But so it can be as simple as gratitude. Like true gratitude. Like most people don't have or haven't really cultivated an experience of true gratitude.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people for a really long time because I was so caught up in the trench, right? Like of all of our problems. It's hard to find gratitude when you're just like, surviving. But that's where nature a lot of times can come in, where you maybe can't find gratitude in your life. But if you go out and you're connecting to nature and you see something really beautiful, for a lot of people, something like that is the first time that they can feel real gratitude.
Yeah.
And a connection to that, like, oh, wait, there's all this beauty right here. Or, having an interaction, like a random kind of unscripted interaction with an animal or some sort of wildlife. Or why pets are so incredible and important is because a lot of times we feel a connection. We're able to feel a connection to our pets that we are unable to feel with other humans because it's become unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just a reminder. And those moments can be spiritual too. Like, it doesn't have to be this big complex thing or an active, like if you're an atheist and you feel like you can't have a spiritual practice, that's just not true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's just you're just walking. And after a while, it just becomes it's just who you are. It doesn't have to be separate. and you just bring all these pieces together. I have the issue of my newsletter. 1A issue is literally about gratitude. This idea of if all you have is gratitude, that would be enough. That's literally the premise of the entire newsletter. I'm going to link it here as well. Okay, so this is good, Kim. So now let's get into, I asked you this question earlier, but then we had a little technical difficulty. But I wanted to know from you in your idea of what trauma is and then what healing is.
Trauma, I think if you read books from different authorities on trauma, you'll find multiple definitions of it. I don't think that there is a really clear definition, but one thing that the science is pointing to is that trauma originates in the body. It's a dysregulated nervous system, and the psychological effects are the fallout or the fallout from that physical experience. So the trauma in the body happens first, and the symptom can be psychological.
They used to think it was reversed?
Yes, they used to think it was reversed, that it started in the brain and then the body responded. Some of that is because, like the vagus nerve, there's more nerves running from the body to the brain than from the brain to the body. Like there's physical evidence to this as well as anecdotal evidence is, wait, if we heal the body, then suddenly our psychological issues start to dissipate, right? And
what'd you say? There's more nerves
running? There's more nerves running. It's actually really interesting, and you're probably going to want to edit this out, but it's really, I'm kind of a nerd about this. I just heard this too around the ear. Like there's actually more nerves running from the ear into the brain or something. And so like there's this whole thing around the brain can actually cause you to hear things that aren't there. That's why we hear psychosis. Like when people are in a psychosis state, they can hear things like somebody's standing here talking to me, like next to me, but it's outside of me. It's not in my head. But the brain can send those signals, right? And as far as the nervous system goes, they're now realizing there's more brains running from the body to the brain than from the brain to the body, meaning the body has a lot more impact on the brain than vice versa.
That's good to know. I did find out that the ears have more nerves than anyone ever knew. I found that out years ago. But yeah, because it can release so much stress if you pull on them and even blood pressure. But I'm going to link, it made me want to link The Body Keeps the Score. I'm going to put that in the description of this because I think that's a good book for people to read. Okay, so.
No, it's great. But so really trauma is a dysregulated nervous system at the base thing. And lots of things can cause trauma. So we all know the really big thing. Like when we first started talking about PTSD or trauma, when it was at least in the American zeitgeist, it was all about war vets. People coming home with PTSD because they saw action. These big scary things happened to them. And then they came home and they had PTSD. Yes, in the zeitgeist, it was all this big trauma, right? Like it always had to be these really big things. But we now know that trauma being a dysregulated nervous system, anything can dysregulate one's nervous system, and it's different for everybody, right? All of us have different all of our nervous systems have different capacities for different reasons. And so we now know that holding your urine too long can actually dysregulate your nervous system. Now, listen, all of us get dysregulated nervous systems, right? That's fight, flight, freeze. It's a survival mechanism. If we're being chased by a tiger, we're going to, our nervous system is going to go into either fight, flight, or freeze for survival. It's going to assess the situation and it's going to do it compulsively or subconsciously. You're not going to think about it. Your body's going to respond, right? It's either going to play dead, it's going to try to outrun it, or it's going to try to fight it off, right? And a healthy nervous system, once you're out of danger, your nervous system can re-regulate and take itself out of that. It can assess that it's in a safe place, and then it will go back to regulated. Sometimes if we don't have capacity or there's too many instances of trauma, there's all kinds of reasons, but our nervous system can get stuck in the fight, flight, freeze. And that's dysregulated nervous system. So now if you're stuck, dysregulated, and you're stuck in fight or flight, now you're going to have these weird compulsive reactions to little things that don't make sense. But it's because your nervous system is constantly under threat because it never got out of it's never realized it's safe and was able to go back to that safe place. Does that make sense?
It does, because one of the questions on the list, this was from my sister. I told you I asked a couple of questions to a couple of my friends before our call, and my sister wanted to know, she thought a good question for everyone to know the answer to is how important is resetting the nervous system for healing trauma. So it does make sense, because when we're trapped, so when we talk about the inner child, right, it's that inner child that really couldn't respond to certain things, like in the example you just talked about, right? But when we carry that into adulthood and we still behave as if we're trapped, right? Because we have that. So can you talk a little bit about that? You know what I'm saying? Like how
childhood trauma gets carried into adulthood?
Yeah, because I think that ties in with what you just said. We still respond to things that is what's happening when we talk about these things, when we speak of inner child. And you do a lot of, with me in particular, and I know probably with your other clients, a lot of times you'll pull energy from me. First of all, let me just say, everyone, Kim is never wrong. So when she says she taps...
That's not true.
With me, you're never wrong with me. When you tap into my energy, when you say you can access your client's emotional energy, I don't know how the hell you do it. That's what I'm saying. I never asked questions in the beginning. I'm just like, what is she? I think when I first had a session with you, I was like, are you psychic? I thought you could see. I don't know. I didn't know.
It's intuitive. It's the same thing.
Yeah, so I just didn't understand if you were seeing pictures, because it's so accurate. Because normally, I'll just say, if you have a session with Kim or someone like her, or at least the way Kim approaches her work, she'll ask you to talk a little bit. But sometimes you don't even have to talk. When you get on the phone, she can feel your energy, like, what's going on with you? I can feel this or that. Or when you start talking, and she's never wrong with, if I'm explaining the story or just talking, she can start picking up the actual energy I'm feeling. And even if I didn't have words for it, she now is putting words for it, because I'm so discombobulated. I'm so dysregulated, right? I don't even know what's going on with me. But so that's what I mean by you're never wrong. You pick it up. It mirrors what I'm feeling, and you give me language for it a lot of times. But oftentimes, or a lot of times, you're pulling energy from a childhood version of me. Usually, it's 6 for me, 6, 5, the 9. My mother left when I was between 4 or 5, so that's probably why. But the other day,
I was going to say it. So in those ages come up, they're different for everybody, because they're usually around when the child experienced some form of trauma.
Exactly. So, and then the other day was the first time you were like, it's almost like I have to talk to your 21 years old self. I don't think we ever had an adult in there, an adult version of me. But this is a good segue into that first question, is how important is resetting the nervous system to healing our trauma? Because so much of our trauma began in childhood. And what you just described a little while ago, when you talked about the fight or flight or freeze, and then they have other responses now. You have fawn. You have all these other things they've added to it now too, right? But fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm a fighter or flighter for sure. I'm going to fight or I'm going to flight. But when you are not in these environments that are technically, they're not safe. I'm in a safe space now. I've created safety for myself in all of these ways, right? And this is where you realize, the healing is not on the outside, because you can do all these safe things that make you feel like you are safe. I can make money. I can be an ambitious woman. I can have my house. I can have my this. And then you realize I still am having these responses as if I'm not safe. So that ties into childhood trauma to me, and how important it is to heal that part of ourselves, which is one of the first questions. How important is it? Yeah. But I think it all ties seamlessly together, and it makes perfect sense. But I'd like for you to connect the dots a little bit more. Like, well, that's the question. How important is resetting the nervous system and healing our trauma? But I want to connect it to this idea of we can carry trauma, like you said. We still have responses as if we're in these trigger responses, as if we're in these situations and we're no longer there, because that is what it means to carry the trauma. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And that's childhood.
Well, I think to your first question, I think that is the definition of healing your trauma, is regulating your nervous system.
Okay.
Have you had to use like a one sentence? Now, how do I regulate my nervous system? I think there are multiple ways and multiple tools to do that. And for some people, it takes very little, depending on what it is and the capacity of their nervous system. And for other people, it can take many of those tools and some time to unwind. But yes, regulating the nervous system is if the definition of trauma is a dysregulated nervous system, then yes, you need to regulate your nervous system to heal your trauma.
So the answer to that question is how important is resetting our nervous system? It is the most important thing.
Yeah, it's basically the only answer.
It's the only answer. Great. I love it. Yeah.
It's the only answer. You have to regulate your nervous system. And that might look different. It's going to maybe look differently for, if you have 10 people in a room, it might look 10 different ways how they're going to do that, which I know is unfortunate because everybody wants to take a pill. Like they want the answer of like, just tell me what to do or let me take the pill and fix it. And unfortunately, you might need to shop around and see what works for you a little bit, or you might need to do different modalities because you don't have access. Again, your brain, your subconscious brain only wants to keep you safe, right? Mm-hmm. So you might not have access to certain aspects of healing, and you have to come in from a different level. And then you do that first, and it creates some space and more capacity. And then these other things are approachable and attainable, and you can access them and start to use these tools.
I love that because the other question was how do we, so there were two other questions. One was the idea that you cannot establish safety outside of yourself. That was one. And then the other was, for my other friend Kenneth, he asked this one, how do people stay grounded? So we're recording this today, and yesterday the U.S. bombed Iran, right? So people...
very... I mean, frankly, it's terrifying.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Here in California, and Kim is as well, and all throughout the United States, we have ICE raids, right? They're scooping up people on the streets who they think are not, don't have their papers or not citizens of the United States,
and even scooping up American citizens in the process, and they're masked with no ID. So now, no matter what you feel about that, whether you're for it or against it, there's no way it's not unsettling that masked, unmarked people are pulling people off the streets, because now anybody can show up dressed similarly and you would have no idea if it's an actual authority, or somebody that's imitating one to kidnap you for whatever reason, right? Like, it just is unsettling.
So whether you have seen it directly, you haven't seen it, I think most of us, a lot of us, and my friend Kenneth even said this, but he's like, how do you stay grounded when the world outside and inside feels so destabilized? So those tie into what you just said. But before that, I just want to make a comment. The thing about, you said when you hold your urine too long, it dysregulates your nervous system?
It can be as little as that. My point is it can be as minor, because it's really about your body's react. It's not psychological. Trauma, that's the point I'm trying to get at. Psychological things can cause trauma, absolutely. But it's physical. So even something as simple as that can, depending on your nervous system's capacity at the moment of doing that, can throw it into fight, flight, freeze, can make it feel threatened, and it can get stuck.
Yeah. It just made me realize how intelligent the body is, because even when it's scary things. So when my mother left, when I was younger, I used to pee on myself. I used to pee in the bed. Mm-hmm. And, you get in trouble for that. But I realize now, saying that was probably my body regulating itself, and I remember being so embarrassed because my this woman who used to help my father take care of us. So sometimes we would have to spend the night at her house. She lived in our building, but she lived on a different floor. So they would have to put this plastic underneath the sheet for me. And they would be, she wasn't the friendliest woman, but when he had, worked late at night, my younger sister and I would sleep at her house until he got home from work very late or in the middle of the night. And I remember the sound of that plastic and how irritating it was for everybody else in the household. But I just started peeing, and I realized now that was probably my body knowing that it needed to regulate itself.
Or being super dysregulated, and so it couldn't control itself anymore.
Right.
Like
Right.
it's, you
Either
know,
way,
it
was,
could be either of those things. But yeah, it definitely was a nervous system issue.
people can't understand it intellectually, and they try to push it out of you or push it, stop it. You can't. It's not that simple. And for me, my whole spiritual path, like I said, so many things happen to me physically first. Almost always something happens, and then I'm trying to figure out what the hell just happened to me. Whether it's spiritually, whether it's health-wise. I have a friend, she says, your body is loud. Like, I remember when the pandemic hit and everyone didn't know, do I have COVID? Do I have COVID? You didn't know. You coughed, you thought you had COVID.
Right.
And my friend was like, you don't ever have to worry because your body is loud. You don't ever have to ever wonder what's going on with you. It will speak to you. And it's so true. It has always spoken to me first. That was my first session with you, the spine thing. And then what the hell is going on? Then all the tech. So it's always my body first. So this conversation makes me more grateful that my body is so in tune, even though it's not been fun to have so many physical ailments and things that I've had to have.
I was going to say it's a blessing and a feel like a curse.
And for me, it's probably the only thing that can get me to pay attention because I am so busy and doing all this other stuff. Like that will sit me down, you know, and it's just so I love that. But so those were the other questions on the main list, which was, just this idea that we really can't establish safety outside of ourselves. And the other one was the question from my friend Kenneth, how do we stay grounded? And I think that's a tool that he's looking for. So I would love to know if you could answer these two questions.
Let's start with the safety, because you talked about it a little bit, right? Earlier when you were talking about, when you brought up, wait a minute, I did all these things to create safety, but I'm still not safe because of this idea of childhood trauma,
You have the car,
right?
you have the money, you have the job, you have the house. Yeah.
Right. So, and sometimes for some people that will cultivate safety, right? But when we talk about needing to cultivate safety and it needing to come from within ourselves.
Wait, I'm sorry. I think I might have said it too more in relation to trauma. Like you think you're going to feel better overall and you realize all these things didn't take that feeling away.
Right. But you do need to cultivate safety as part of, in my opinion, as part of trauma work. Mm-hmm. Because as long as you feel unsafe, it's a little bit like what you said with hope. It's so funny that you earlier in the call or earlier in this talk, you talked about how important hope is. And I just said to somebody today, there is no healing without hope, right? You've got to, hope needs to be there. Well, it's similar with safety. You have, part of regulating the nervous system, right, is safety. And so our job is to cultivate safety. And if you're a person with childhood trauma, if you're a person that grew up in some sort of unsafe environment, your job is, as an adult, is to reparent that child. And reparenting that child is because all those pieces live in us. All the little selves, right? Like our 5-year-old is there, our angry teenager is there, our whatever. So as an adult, your job is to establish trust with those little parts of yourself by cultivating safety. And that's going to look different for everyone depending on what those parts of ourselves deemed unsafe or made them feel unsafe. Does that make sense? So we think money is going to provide safety for us. But if we lived in a house where money wasn't the issue, we had plenty of money, we had plenty of this, we had, that was fine. But our dad was an alcoholic who beat our mom. Money isn't going to parent that little self because that was never a place that they felt unsafe.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you don't need it, but it's not going to parent those little pieces.
Yeah. And then and that's why, because that's what gets you thinking. If you're someone where that isn't going to solve those pieces, then if you are someone like probably a lot of the women that you work with, and people where you think you don't really know what will provide safety, but you're going on what the outside world tells you, right? So you think, oh, as long as I have this job, as long as I have these credentials, as long as you're just building this life because you think that is going to provide that, but that's not the crux of the issue, but you don't realize it until it's too late. So I realize now that that's not everyone's experience. For some reason, some people that could have provided them for safety.
Yeah, absolutely. If you grew up in a house where, in an environment where, I mean, we have plenty of children growing up in homelessness.
Yeah.
We have I grew up in a situation where money was always very tight. We almost lost the house a bunch of times because of my dad's accident, and it was just my mother working, and there were all these medical expenses, and so me making money is probably more effective at parenting my little self or making my little self feel safe than it would be for somebody who didn't have that stress.
So no wonder nothing I've been doing has been working for me, because I'm not saying my father didn't have money problems, but he didn't make me aware of them if he did. Mm-hmm. So we grew up in Spanish Harlem, but he had a car. And there was 6 of us. And even when my older 4 siblings were no longer in the house, he married a woman who had 4 children. So there were always 6 people. We went on vacations. I mean, to Disney World. To this moment, I don't know how my father took 8 people to Disney World on his salary, right? Or to Aruba, or we would go out the country to Canada. So people thought we were like the middle class people in New York, right? Like, he had a car. Nobody has cars in New York, right? Like, we were like that family that other people's kids could come. There were so many of us that he would take other people's kids, to picnics with us. It was just more kids in the house, right? He would pick me and my sister up from school every Friday and take us to McDonald's. He'd be like treats. But so even though we didn't grow up rich, was not aware we had money problems.
Right. You didn't feel unsafe.
I didn't feel unsafe in that way. So that would make sense that for me, my path when I didn't know I was on a healing journey. I didn't know I even had trauma. But when I started to excel in my career or get more material things and make more and more money, it still didn't make me feel okay inside.
Right. So here's my question. If that was that, maybe you felt disrespected.
So I was going to say that because one of the pivotal points for me with you was when I was in my last relationship, and I've talked about this. I've written about it in one of my newsletters, but man, I could feel it like it was yesterday. Like I was in a relationship, and I don't know what I had convinced myself of, but you said to me, you have convinced yourself that he is a source of security when in fact he is the opposite, or a source of safety. And it snapped me out of it like I had been in a daze for 4 years. But I mistook that for safety, I guess, but that wasn't the thing I really needed. Similar to how I thought having the job and having the car, there was something else I really needed that was lacking. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no. And, like I said, it's different for everyone. But if you grew up in a situation where you felt alone, right? Where you didn't feel like, there was 1,000 people around us, but maybe you didn't. And I'm not outing you in any way. I'm using it more as like a hypothesis or like an example, right? So maybe in that situation, you grew up in this big house full of people, but maybe none of them were supported and you felt really alone, or they were emotionally abusive, or some version where you just felt very much alone and everything was on you and you couldn't rely or depend on anybody. Then when you get to be an adult, all you want is somebody to rely and depend on. And then you think that's going to make you safe. But I
think I was mistaking the unit, the fact that we lived together, that we were together.
Because it's the I'm with this person. They're in my house. This is my part. Because whether you're married or not, once you're living with that person, that's your partner. Mm-hmm. Right? Now I finally have it on paper. This person is going to protect me.
Yeah.
And then it's very scary, especially if you feel unprotected as a child. You're looking for anything. So if he did anything that was in the guise of being protective, then your little you is like, look, he's protecting us.
Yeah.
Even if that's not the primary experience.